The man who thinks alone cannot be controlled. Most people will hear a sentence like that and mistake it for arrogance, rebellion, or pride. They will imagine a person who rejects advice, refuses cooperation, and isolates himself from the world. But that is not what it means. To think alone is not to hate people. It is not to despise society. It is not to become cold or unreachable. It means something far more dangerous than that. It means becoming mentally independent. It means developing the ability to stand in a room full of certainty and still ask whether certainty is deserved. It means hearing the loudest voices, seeing the most popular opinions, feeling the strongest pressures, and still keeping enough distance inside your own mind to examine what is true and what is manipulation. Most people never build that distance. Their inner world is crowded. Their thoughts are filled with borrowed language, inherited fears, secondhand desires, and opinions they accepted because they arrived early and were repeated often. They call those thoughts their own because they have carried them for years. But age does not create ownership. Repetition does not create truth. Familiarity does not create wisdom. A man can spend half his life defending ideas he never chose, chasing goals he never examined, and fearing judgments he never agreed to value. He can call it living, while spending every day reacting to invisible strings. That is how control works at its highest level. It does not always look like chains. It often looks like normal life. From childhood, people are trained long before they realize training is happening. They are taught what success should look like, what failure should feel like, what kind of approval matters, what kind of shame should be feared, who deserves respect, who deserves suspicion, what dreams are realistic, what emotions are acceptable, what questions are dangerous. Some of that teaching is useful, some of it protects, some of it gives structure, but mixed inside useful lessons are many assumptions nobody tested. Those assumptions are passed like heirlooms. A father hands them to a son, a culture hands them to the next generation, institutions reinforce them, friends reward conformity to them, media packages them attractively. Soon the individual cannot tell where society ends and his own thinking begins. He believes he is choosing, but he is selecting from options someone else approved long ago. He believes he is expressing himself, but he is performing a script written by forces he barely notices. He believes he is free because nobody is shouting commands at him, yet the deepest commands are often silent. Control thrives wherever people confuse reaction with thought. If someone can predict what will trigger you, they can guide you. If they know what praise you crave, they can shape your behavior. If they know what fear freezes you, they can narrow your options. If they know what group identity you cling to, they can make you defend things you do not understand. Entire systems depend on this predictability. They do not need to dominate every person by force. They only need enough people to respond automatically. Outrage here, anxiety there, envy here, tribal loyalty there. A headline appears, and thousands feel before they think. A rumor spreads, and thousands repeat before they verify. A symbol is criticized, and thousands attack as if their own soul was threatened. This is not strength. This is reflex. The controlled man is often the man who feels most intense, because intensity can hide emptiness where examination should be. The independent man develops a dangerous habit. He pauses. That pause seems small, but it changes everything. Between stimulus and response, he inserts scrutiny. Between pressure and action, he inserts reflection. Between insult and anger, he inserts judgment. Between praise and pride, he inserts caution. That gap is where freedom lives. Most manipulation fails when a person learns to wait long enough to inspect it. Fear loses power when examined. Urgency weakens when questioned. Popularity becomes irrelevant when measured against evidence. Flattery becomes transparent when one no longer starves for approval. The world becomes harder to use against you when you stop lending it your nervous system. Many people say they want freedom, but what they often want is comfortable dependence. They want someone else to decide what is true while allowing them the feeling of participation. They want leaders to think, experts to conclude, influencers to interpret, institutions to certify, crowds to validate, and then they want to choose among ready-made answers. This arrangement feels efficient. It saves energy. It protects ego because if the chosen answer fails, responsibility can be shared, but it carries a hidden price. The person who outsources judgment slowly weakens the faculty of judgment itself. Like an unused muscle, it atrophies. Soon he cannot tolerate ambiguity. He cannot hold two competing ideas in mind long enough to compare them. He cannot say, "I do not know," without panic. He cannot change his mind without humiliation. He cannot stand alone because he never practiced standing at all. To think alone requires courage, because the first thing you meet is not truth. The first thing you meet is yourself. You meet contradictions you ignored. You meet fears dressed as principles. You meet desires disguised as morals. You meet habits pretending to be identity. You discover how often you defended positions because they benefited you socially, not because they were sound. You notice how many of your strongest reactions are inherited. This encounter can be uncomfortable enough that many people run back to noise. Noise is merciful to the unexamined life. Constant content, endless commentary, perpetual distraction. These keep a person busy enough to avoid meeting his own unfinished mind. Silence is harsher. Silence asks questions nobody else can answer for you. There is a loneliness in independent thought that few discuss honestly. When you stop agreeing automatically, some relationships change. Not because you became cruel, but because certain bonds were built on unconscious alignment. Some people only know how to connect through shared assumptions. When assumptions are questioned, they feel attacked. Others relied on your predictability. They knew which opinions would gain your nod, which emotional cues would move you, which expectations would govern you. When those patterns disappear, they may call you distant, difficult, changed. They are right about one thing: you changed. But growth often feels like betrayal to those invested in your previous shape. This loneliness should not be romanticized. It can sting. There are evenings when the crowd seems warm and certainty looks tempting. There are moments when being misunderstood feels heavier than being wrong. There are seasons when you wonder whether independent thought is merely stubbornness in elegant clothing. These doubts are healthy if they refine you rather than break you. The goal is not isolation for its own sake. The goal is to become capable of solitude, so that connection becomes a choice, rather than a dependency. The man who cannot be alone will eventually accept almost anything to avoid it. Machiavelli understood that power belongs not only to rulers but to perception, incentives, fear, appearances, and human weakness. He observed people as they are, not as they wish to appear. If he were speaking now, he would likely note that the easiest citizen to govern is not the poorest or weakest, but the one whose emotions are public property. A man whose anger can be summoned on command, whose desires can be manufactured, whose loyalties can be purchased with symbols, whose attention can be rented by novelty, is manageable regardless of his wealth. By contrast, the difficult man is inwardly governed. He may cooperate, contribute, obey laws, and live peacefully, yet he remains difficult to command because commands must pass through reason before reaching action. Reason, however, is not mere intelligence. Many intelligent people are easily controlled because intelligence can serve appetite. Cleverness can justify any impulse. Education can decorate bias. Vocabulary can disguise confusion. True reason is disciplined honesty directed at one's own mind first. It asks not only whether others are wrong, but whether I am motivated to believe this because it flatters me, excuses me, enriches me, or protects my image. Without this self-suspicion, a person simply becomes a sophisticated fool. One of the greatest traps is identity possession. When beliefs fuse with identity, conversation becomes warfare. If a fact threatens the belief, it feels like a threat to the self. Then evidence is resisted not because it is weak, but because it is painful. This is why some people become more rigid when shown contradiction. They are not defending logic. They are defending belonging, pride, tribe, biography. The independent man learns to hold beliefs lightly and principles firmly. Beliefs are current maps. Principles are standards for updating maps. If reality disproves the route, he changes route without feeling annihilated. His ego is not built from being right yesterday. Experience is another teacher the crowd often neglects. They can quote wisdom on discipline without ever enduring discipline, speak of courage without risk, analyze failure without having failed publicly, discuss love without sacrifice, preach patience without waiting. Borrowed language creates the illusion of depth. Then life applies pressure, and the structure collapses. The man who thinks alone respects theory but tests it in reality. He knows pain reveals what philosophy concealed. He knows stress exposes whether convictions are costumes or bone. You can read every strategy book in the world, but until someone lies to your face with a smile, you do not know discernment. You can consume endless content on confidence, but until rejection visits repeatedly, you do not know steadiness. You can discuss leadership abstractly, but until responsibility for others rests on your choices, you do not know weight. Direct encounters with reality carve understanding where information merely paints it. This is why some quiet people carry authority without announcing it. They have been instructed by consequences. The controlled person often seeks constant signals from outside. Tell me what to value. Tell me who to blame. Tell me what to desire next. Tell me how I compare. Tell me whether I am winning. The independent person turns inward for first judgment and outward for evidence. Notice the order. He does not worship his feelings. He consults them, then investigates. He does not worship consensus. He considers it, then verifies. He does not worship authority. He learns from it, then tests it. This order preserves dignity. How does one begin? Not through dramatic rebellion, not through declaring everyone sheep. That is childish vanity. Independence begins quietly. It begins when you notice a strong opinion rising in you and ask where it came from. It begins when you feel pressure to agree and choose to remain silent until you think. It begins when praise excites you and you ask whether the praised behavior matches your values. It begins when criticism wounds you and you ask whether the critic actually sees clearly. It begins when you schedule time with no device, no noise, no external input, and let your own thoughts arrive awkwardly at first. It begins when you admit ignorance without shame. These small acts accumulate into sovereignty. Learn also to study incentives. Whenever a message reaches you, ask who benefits if I believe this, fear this, buy this, repeat this, vote for this, hate this, identify with this. Incentives do not automatically disprove a claim, but ignoring incentives leaves you naive. Many noble words are vehicles for ordinary motives. Many emotional campaigns are profit-wearing virtue. Many urgent causes are attention-seeking immoral costume. The independent mind listens to language, but watches outcomes. Guard your attention as you would guard land. Attention determines thought. Thought determines action. Action determines life. If others decide what captures your mind each hour, they indirectly shape your future. Endless novelty fractures depth. Constant outrage exhausts judgment. Permanent comparison breeds dissatisfaction. The man who thinks alone chooses inputs deliberately. He reads beyond headlines. He sits with one difficult idea longer than others scroll through 100 easy ones. He knows concentration is strategic power in an age of distraction. Do not confuse calm with passivity. The inwardly free man can be decisive, even fierce, because his action is not diluted by inner chaos. He can say no without trembling, because approval is not his oxygen. He can wait, because urgency does not own him. He can walk away from manipulative relationships, degrading work, false opportunities, seductive crowds, because dependence no longer dictates terms. Many people stay trapped, not because cages are locked, but because cages contain familiar rewards. There is also humility in true independence. Since you no longer rely on crowds for certainty, you become more comfortable saying, I may be mistaken. This paradox surprises people. The loudest certainty often belongs to those borrowing confidence from numbers. Solitary thought knows its own limits. It has wrestled with complexity. It has changed position before. It has seen how easily the mind can deceive itself. Therefore it becomes both firmer in principle and softer in ego. You will lose some things on this path. You may lose easy belonging. You may lose admiration from those who preferred your compliance. You may lose old identities that once comforted you. You may lose simplistic narratives that made life feel neatly divided. You may lose the excuse of blaming everyone else for your condition. These losses can feel severe, but what you gain is rarer. You gain authorship. You gain a center not rented from public opinion. You gain discernment. You gain resilience under pressure. You gain the ability to cooperate without dissolving. You gain the power to hear many voices without becoming an echo. There will be moments when standing alone is expensive. Refusing corruption may cost opportunity. Refusing fashionable lies may cost status. Refusing emotional blackmail may cost relationships. Refusing herd panic may cost temporary acceptance. Yet submission also has costs, only delayed. Every time you betray your own judgment to purchase comfort, you weaken trust in yourself. Eventually you no longer know whether your choices are chosen. That is a deep poverty hidden beneath surface success. The world does need community, mentorship, institutions, and shared effort. Independent thinking is not a war against these things. It is what allows healthy participation in them. A community of dependence becomes a mob. A community of independent minds becomes civilization. Mentorship without judgment becomes worship. Mentorship with judgment becomes growth. Institutions without scrutiny decay. Institutions examined by thoughtful citizens improve. Cooperation among people who surrendered themselves is fragile. Cooperation among self-possessed people is strong because it is voluntary. So walk alone when necessary, not because solitude is glamorous, but because some roads cannot be crowded. Reflection cannot be outsourced. Integrity cannot be delegated. Final responsibility cannot be transferred. Listen widely, learn humbly, love deeply, build with others when worthy, but reserve the throne of judgment inside your own mind. Let advice enter as a guest, not conqueror. Let trends knock, not move in. Let fear speak, not command. Let praise warm you, not steer you. The man who thinks alone cannot be controlled, because control requires an unattended interior. It requires reflex where there should be reflection, hunger where there should be standards, emptiness where there should be principle, panic where there should be patience. Close those gates and much of the world loses its handle on you. You may still suffer, still err, still doubt, still learn painfully. Freedom does not remove difficulty. It changes who is steering through it. At the end of life, many regrets are forms of obedience. I knew better but followed. I wanted more but feared opinion. I saw truth but chose comfort. I stayed because leaving was lonely. I spoke because silence was unpopular. I remained silent because speech was costly. The independent path does not guarantee glory, wealth, or applause. It guarantees something subtler and more precious, the chance to live from the inside out. So tonight, before sleep, ask yourself a ruthless question. Which thoughts in me are truly mine? Which fears were installed? Which desires were marketed? Which loyalties were inherited? Which habits are merely repeated surrender? Sit with the discomfort. That discomfort is the sound of chains being noticed. Once noticed, they can be broken. And when morning comes, begin small. Delay one reaction. Question one assumption. Refuse one manipulation. Seek one deeper source. Spend 1 hour in silence. Make one decision that aligns with judgment rather than pressure. Independence is not won in a speech. It is built in repetitions. Brick by brick, choice by choice, thought by thought, a sovereign mind emerges. Then, one day you will notice something strange. The noise that once moved you becomes background. The opinions that once intimidated you become information. The temptations that once steered you become visible. The loneliness that once frightened you becomes peace. You still live among others, but no longer inside them. You still hear the world, but no longer mistake its volume for truth. You still walk with people, but the center of gravity has returned where it always belonged. And that is why the man who thinks alone cannot be controlled. Not because he dominates others, not because he rejects society, not because he knows everything, but because he has taken responsibility for the one territory no tyrant can fully own unless invited, his own mind. Most men lose their freedom long before they lose their life. They surrender it thought by thought, fear by fear, approval by approval. Don't be one of them. Guard your mind, trust your judgment, and remember this. When a man learns to think alone, the world can pressure him, tempt him, even oppose him, but it can never truly control him.